a chat with Robbie Britton actually, and he was saying, well, it's not about your aerobic limit. It's not that physical part, not like lactate threshold. That's totally irrelevant. It's keeping running at a rate where you can keep digesting, keep your GI system on track. So the idea was to run slowly enough so I could keep my stomach online.
Hello and welcome to Series 1, Episode 5 of Outlandish with me, Ed Scott. Super excited this week to bring you a chat I had with Richard McDowell, aka the Turbo Ferret. Richard lives in southwest London, where this podcast was recorded, and in recent years he's made a bit of a name for himself by laying down some incredibly fast times at a number of Centurion ultramarathon races, including the South Downs Way 50 and 100, and the Thames Path 100, where he ran the fastest ever trail 100-miler on British soil. It's safe to say that Richard is the fastest runner I've spoken to on this podcast so far, and quite possibly ever will. He's got an amazing road and cross-country background, so it was really interesting to get his perspective on the trail and ultra scene, given his previous focus on marathons, 10Ks, and other quote-unquote short distances. Richard's also extremely organised and meticulous when it comes to racing, putting together spreadsheets and doing calculations on things like pacing and calorie intake. Practices that have served him really well in the past, but as anyone who's run an ultra knows, a regimented approach can only get you so far, and it was interesting to find out about Richard's experiences running ultramarathons and having to deal with the kind of deep fatigue that can take over when you're on your feet all day. You can watch an unedited video version of this episode on the Outlandish YouTube channel, though I should say it was a pretty hot day when we recorded this, and the GoPro we were filming with did cut out due to overheating halfway through our chat. Did not know that was a thing. But if you watch the video, then you'll be able to see Richard's pretty enviable collection of Centurion trophies, probably the closest I'll ever get to one of those again. As usual, there is a bonus clip at the end of this episode and a quick discussion of next week's episode. But for now, Richard McDowell. Richard McDowell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for welcoming me into your lovely home here in southwest London. How long have you lived here?
Moved to Collies Wood, I think about 7 years ago. Been in this place about 4 years.
Am I right, I might be wrong, in detecting a residual Scottish accent?
You've got a very well-trained ear if you do, because I basically didn't have one, ever. But yes, I did live for 18 years in Edinburgh.
Right. The first 18 years of your life? Or?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And when did you leave? Because I was doing a bit of research/stalking your Strava, and I noticed that some years ago you lived for a few years in India.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So when did you move there?
5 years before I moved here. So I've been with the same employer for 19 years now, I think.
Right.
Which I think is quite unusual in this day and age.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've probably spent about 11 years abroad with them.
Right.
So I spent a couple of years in Serbia, some time in Australia, a couple of years in Brazil,
Right.
Commuted to Italy for a while.
Commuted to Italy.
Yeah, I had a nice warm summer in Abu Dhabi.
Wow.
And then 5 years in India.
5 years. How was that it's a very different culture and climate.
So 4 years I was in Hyderabad, which
Okay.
is sort of south central. If you manage to draw a line east from Mumbai and north from Bangalore, where they intersect, it's pretty much Hyderabad.
Okay.
Just city of about 7 million. It's pretty cosmopolitan, lots of things going on. And that was fine.
Yeah.
There were lots of people to cycle with, socialise with. There were expats if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Running. I think there were a choice of 2 or 3 Olympic swimming pools.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine. And then I moved for the final year to a place in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
South of Calcutta, in the middle of Orissa. And it was...
Is this in the middle of nowhere, like in India? Because you mentioned a city of 7 million. I imagine in India that's a relatively moderate city, or is that quite big by India?
It's one of the bigger ones.
Right.
It's not quite like China where you have these mega cities.
Yeah.
It's quite a big sprawling city with fairly high density population in places. But Orissa was not quite so much fun. It was in the middle of lots of coal and iron ore.
Right.
Maybe just iron ore, actually. And there were lots of steelworks. Steel was why I was in India.
Right.
And I was pretty much the only white face around, and I go out running, and firstly, the humidity was just ridiculous. Within a couple of minutes of running, I'd have sweat dribbling off my chin.
Yeah.
And there'd be one interesting run. I was pursued by a guy on a bicycle who, I'm not quite sure what his intentions were, but I found them rather annoying. And regardless of how fast you are running, you generally you can keep up on a bike.
That.
So 4 years were fine. Last year, it kind of took the edge off a little bit.
And you were doing a lot more cycling back then, is that right? Or were you doing sort of all? Because I know you've done triathlon in the past, right?
Yes. So I was a runner at school, runner at the start of university, and then got distracted by mountain biking.
Right.
And then more of a cycling bias in my life. My first job was working for a mountain bike component company.
Okay.
And then, so cycling was my main thing. So when I went to India, I took a bike with me. And it was great. This was like a ready-made social network.
Yeah.
And also transport. I could get around. I didn't need to be relying on taxis or drivers. A very good way of getting to know the city. Geography. And then a friend of mine, he was wanting to do his first triathlon, a half Ironman in Sri Lanka. And he wanted someone to train with.
Right.
And I had got the time on my hands, so I was happy to get up at 5 every morning. So I started running. I think my first run in India was a 17-kilometer group run, and it was like, I haven't run for a few years, but this seems to be okay.
So got back into it.
Yes. So then I did my first triathlon when I was in India. My first triathlon was in Indonesia.
Right. And that was a triathlon or a half Ironman?
A half Ironman triathlon.
Yes.
Yes.
But not like Olympic distance triathlon, right?
No.
So that's quite a big, first one.
Well, the interesting thing about the Ironman and half Ironman type disciplines is the ratio of swimming to cycling and running.
Is it different?
Yeah. So an Olympic is you got 1,500 meter swim, 40k bike, 10k run.
Yeah.
Whereas if you step up to the half Ironman, the swim only gets 400 meters longer.
Right.
But the rest of them are about double.
Yeah.
So your 1.9k swim, 90k bike, and a 21k run.
Interesting.
So if you're an utterly pathetic swimmer like I am
as well.
It's much better. You're going to do much better in a half Ironman type.
Oh, that's good to know.
Type.
I've avoided that world because of swimming, but maybe I should give it a go.
So my first triathlon, I came out of the water 20 minutes behind the leader, but I had identical bike and run splits.
Wow. There you go.
So I think I finished 7th overall and 3rd in my age group. Admittedly, it was a fairly small event. Yeah. And then I quickly realised that actually running was my strength, being scrawny little runs.
You're speaking my language. Well, this is actually our second time meeting, technically. The first was, as is so often the case in my friendships, in a pub toilet in Wendover in the middle of January. It was just before the start of the 2022 Country's Capital, and I spotted your distinctive red shorts and had a chat with you before realising we were surrounded by men peeing and probably wasn't the best place to chat. I do remember asking you, though, that day if you were going to be racing or just sort of taking it easy. I don't think at the time I was like fully aware of how fast a runner I was talking to. You ended up running 4:57, which was a minute off the course record in what can only be described as like semi-apocalyptic conditions. It was rainy, it was cold, it was horrendously muddy.
There was a constant headwind as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, maybe for you were going a bit faster. So what I kind of want to know is like how do you get to the point where you can run a distance like that in conditions like that at 4:18 kilometer pace? And that's kind of my singular goal with this chat. So you started running at school.
Yep.
How quickly did you pick up on the fact that you were quite fast, or is that something that emerged just with the years of training?
I was never particularly good at school,
Right.
possibly because I didn't really do a huge amount of training. And again, I wasn't particularly good at university again, possibly because I didn't really do much training.
What sort of times were we like benchmark? Do you know back then that you're talking about? Because some people say I'm not particularly fast and they do 36-minute 10K and you're like, okay, well,
I've no idea. This was pre-GPS watch.
Right.
I wasn't doing 10Ks and things. It was just cross-country.
right.
So I've no idea exactly what the distances were. I can't remember in my times. But I was mid-pack, maybe slightly further forward than mid-pack.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, honestly, no idea how fast I was still.
Right.
Then my first, again, in India, going back to India again, my first marathon, I thought that a reasonable goal time was 3 hours. Anything quicker than 3 hours was going to be okay. And I did 2:59.36.
Wow. That's your first marathon.
Yep. I've been doing a reasonable amount of cycling, a reasonable amount of running, but that was my first. Actually, that might have actually been my first pure running race after university.
And did you adopt a structured training cycle for that, or it was more just I'll do a marathon, try it out?
It was just ad hoc. No, the marathon was coming up. So yeah, I was building up some miles.
Yeah.
But there was really no structure at all.
Right.
I think it was probably my training part at the time. He had some structure in his plan to get to half Ironman, and I was just doing whatever he was doing.
Yeah, sort of residually.
Just keep tagging along.
Right.
It's funny actually. I think that our training benefited him more than me, because I think looking back, I was probably a significantly stronger runner. So it was easy training for me.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really pushing me.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You push yourself too quickly and it's a recipe for injury.
Yeah.
So first marathon 2:59.
And was that you said it was in India, so was that in really hot, humid conditions? Or?
That was in Hyderabad.
Yeah.
Thing about races are they start ridiculously early.
Yeah.
So that was a 5 a.m. start.
Right.
So it wasn't too bad, but it was net uphill. And yes,
right.
it was getting warm. It was quite good conditions, actually. It was probably warm. There was a light rain shower at some point, but finished by 8 a.m. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
The people taking longer would have significantly poorer.
Yeah, that's the strange paradox at the heart of a lot of running, isn't it? Is that, if you're out there running 3 hours for a marathon, there are people out there for 5 or 6 hours. They go through a lot more in some sense.
Oh, it's a considerably different pursuit, yes.
Yeah. I mean, someone like Jim Walmsley, I don't know if you know Jim Walmsley, the American runner.
I have heard the name.
So he's probably never run for 24 hours straight because he never has to, because every race he does, he finishes much less than that.
Well, I did my longest run last weekend, so...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll come on to that. I think it's fair to say you're probably the fastest runner I've ever properly spoken to. Definitely the fastest who's ever been on this podcast, and probably ever will. So I've got some times here that I just want to read out so that our listeners can kind of get a sense of what we're dealing with. So we've got the 4 classic distances. We've got the 5K, according to your Strava, 14:32. Is that right?
Power 10 rounded up to 14:33,
Bastards.
which I was upset about. That second makes a difference over that. Yes.
I mean, to be honest, like when people say, sub 20 is a great goal to aim for, so 14:32 is just mad. We got 10K 31:14. I can't quite believe
that's on the
numbers.
track.
Oh,
that's on the track.
Piece of
on
piss.
The roads 31:32, I think. And
Okay.
I've done that race twice. The Vitality 10K, and got identical times each time.
Oh, no way. Identical splits as well, or very different races?
Very different splits.
Yeah.
Very different splits. The second time I did it, I started off much faster and had a very, very painful finish.
That's the way to do it, I think. The ultra runner's way.
Yeah, not so sure.
The track one, was that the night of the 10,000 meter PB, or whatever they call it?
Yep.
I've never quite understood what that event is. I think
It's
probably
amazing.
because I can't enter it, but
it's amazing.
it looks incredible. Yeah,
You've
It
got
was
so many
recently,
races. You can, as long as you're reasonably quick.
Yeah.
I think it's sub 34. I think you need to for a guy.
Right.
Is it maybe sub 40 for a woman?
I mean, I've only just hit sub 40 last year, so I'm not quite there yet. But
So I think there are about 8 races or something over the course of the evening, maybe more. So you have a projected time, and you're in a race with maybe 20 people, all with very similar goals. And when I did it, they had the wave light pacing.
right.
So you got these lights going around beside you on the track side.
Oh wow.
To pace you to. So there were 2 different goal times. So there were red lights and blue lights on the different times. So you knew exactly what pace for totally even splits to run at. And it was fantastic. And then you've got the proper competitive, the European Cup races later on, the men and the women.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'd love to check that out. I know you can go and watch it.
It's absolutely free. I recommend. It's totally, assuming the weather's nice. If the weather's nasty, you could be in the beer tent. Because there's a tent for the whole length.
Oh wow!
The finishing.
You got something for everyone. Half marathon. One of your time here. I've got 1 hour 10 and 11 seconds. Is that right?
Yes. Interestingly, my half marathon split at London last year was quicker than that.
Oh no way. Yeah, because I've got London Marathon last year, 2 hours 23:10. Is that still your marathon PB?
So the official result, 2:23:06.
Oh, there we go.
So it's 2:23:08 was the last London. I'm not quite sure. Did we miss 1 year or two? I think
we just missed the one, but it was pushed back last year.
Yeah,
because I actually saw you. I live currently in New Cross Gate, so I walked up to Rotherhithe to watch when you came through that bend it does around Rotherhithe.
Round Surrey Quays. And
Yep. And I didn't know I'd seen you, but then I looked back at my photos and I've seen your bright yellow top and your red shorts. So
okay,
definitely spotted you there.
So yes, I was significantly quicker. Interesting. The last London, I didn't really have any plan because after Thames Path last year, I just sort of bimbled about.
Yeah, and
didn't follow any plan at all. But then had a pretty reasonable 5k, that 5k in Battersea, and then went into London with possibly a rather ambitious goal. A significant PB at the halfway, and then 30k. It got quite painful quite quickly. And the redeeming feature was to get a PB by 2 seconds.
Oh,
so if I'd not hit that, I would have been because I was a couple of minutes behind.
Well, my next question was going to be, which of those four are you most proud of? Is it the marathon, or are you... I mean, the 14:32 5K is blisteringly fast.
I think if you look on the England Athletics talent thing, in terms of where they might potentially send some funding or try and get people in teams, I think my 5K is probably my best time.
Right. As a sort of age-graded percentage?
No, not even
thing.
age-graded. Not even age-graded, just outright.
Yeah.
Outright. But obviously there are a lot more people can do that time. So in terms of whether that's a lot more people can do or a lot more people want to.
Do you mean...
As you got the distance, there are less people competing.
Yes, there's a lot more slower runners running 5Ks than marathons, if that makes sense. Well, is that what you mean?
What do I mean? I just mean that it's a lot more. There are a lot more people running 5Ks.
Yes,
fast or slow.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a lot more competitive at the sort of shorter middle distances than it is at the pointy end of a marathon.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Fair enough. Those are fantastic times, but this is a trail running podcast, so we have to talk about trail running. From what I understand, again, having stalked you a little bit, and I might have this wrong, but you started to take your first forays into trail/ultra running, at least as far as the distance is concerned, in 2020, the lockdown year, when you ran a couple of FKTs. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
So you ran the Jubilee Greenway, which is a 60k loop in central London, in 3:43:30. No, I haven't got that wrong. That's 60k in under 4 hours. And then a few months later, the Capital Ring, which is 122Ks in about 10 hours and 15 minutes. You made some great YouTube videos about those. I recommend people check those out. They're awesome. Setting those times whilst filming. How are those experiences as sort of entry points to the ultra distances?
Yeah, it's funny. Obviously, there were no races happening.
Yeah.
And FKT seemed to be the thing that everyone was doing.
Yeah. Because you'd set a couple of shorter FKTs, right? Previously, the Wandle Trail and things like that.
No, they were after.
Oh, they were after.
They were after, yes.
Oh, my bad.
So it just seemed to be, the Capital Ring. Sorry, no, the Jubilee Greenway. That was my first distance greater than marathon, and predictably it got hard after the marathon distance. It's funny that enough. I held that record for I think 6 days, or maybe it was 8 days. And then Paul Martelletti went out and took 6 minutes, 4 or 6 minutes. I can't remember exactly how many minutes off me he took.
Yeah.
I think that's partly because I went out very early. I had some diversions through gates, and I waited for the lift at the Blackwall Tunnel. I should have used the stairs, and so it was marginal. But he had the edge. He's obviously much quicker than me over the marathon. He's a proper runner.
Yeah,
he's a 2:15 guy or something round about that. So
I love how everyone talks about the people faster than them as proper runners. It's so funny.
Oh, they're always someone faster.
Of course, yeah. But there's lots of people slower. So you should take that into account. Sometimes.
There is that. So that was a sort of almost the gateway into longer stuff. And I made a conversation with someone. I should do the capital ring. Oh, don't be ridiculous. That's so too far. And then, sure enough, a month later, I was out doing it.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things was that after Paul Martelletti had taken the Jubilee Greenway, I'd done some significant Strava stalking. I noticed that he used a tap that was totally wasn't on anyone's radar, just near is it University of East London, I think, near the city airport.
Oh, right.
And
you spotted the tap from his Strava file?
Yeah.
How? Just by him slowing down or something?
Well, he'd stopped there, and it was clear that he had stopped. And then I think Google Street View was like, oh, interesting.
Oh, I love it.
I think there might have been a photo as well or something. So and then I went for a recce on my mountain bike. I did a full loop on my mountain bike, recorded the whole thing.
Oh, smart.
That's on YouTube as well. If you're interested in doing the capital.
Oh, that's what that was. Yeah.
You can.
I wasn't sure if you'd strapped something to your chest whilst you were running it as well or something.
No, there are two. There are two. So there's one is just the complete loop on the stem of my mountain bike, and there was also recorded
the vlog
as I went around running as well.
Yeah.
But it was completely unsupported, so it was looking for taps here and there, and looking for little marginal gains, like getting a British Waterways key so I could use the taps along the canal.
Oh, genius!
And the River Lee.
Yes. Oh, brilliant. Well, I think for a lot of our listeners who aren't road runners and don't live in that world, the first time they may have heard of you, certainly the first time I heard of you, was when you rocked up at the South Downs Way 50 in 2021. That's right.
Just look at the date
just
on the
checking
trophy.
one of his many trophies.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, I was also there at that race actually, although I have to say I was hot on your heels for a good minute, and then I let you go. You ran that in 6:02. How was that experience for your first ultra race, especially compared to having done, longer distances completely unsupported?
So the South Downs Way 50 was my qualifier for the Thames Path.
Yes.
So these are both Centurion races, and to run a 100-miler with Centurion, you need to have done a 50-miler or something equivalent.
Yeah.
To prove that you can do something similar.
So your 122k capital ring didn't qualify?
No, it needs to be in a proper race.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly. So things like the Endure 24, things like these relay things. So that there are, I think you need to do 75 miles or something in one of those where you've done a leg of a relay.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be exactly that.
Yeah.
But that it needs to be a proper race. There needs to be proper timing. It can't just be you.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this on my Strava.
Right.
So things like to enter a 50, you need to run a marathon. I think there are some time goals as well. So the 50 was my qualifier, and it's supposed to be a month before the Thames Path. I thought, well, that's, as long as I don't go too hard, as long as I take it relatively easy, it should be a good long training run and probably stand me in good stead. But I knew if I didn't finish it, if I was a DNF, I wouldn't be able to start the Thames Path.
Right.
So it was just a qualifier, so I just needed to get round in a sensible time. But then I had a dodgy hamstring, and I went and had some physio on it, and I said to the guy, look, I've got to run in, I think it was 36 hours. So I went in there with, so he's a sports massage guy. Sort of, you think of sports massage, oh, it's nice and relaxing. It's not, it's painful.
Yeah.
I'd seen him before when I had some plantar fasciitis on my foot, and I don't cry easily. He made me cry. Anyway, so I went in there with one sore hamstring, and I came out with two sore hamstrings.
Oh, good. Balanced it out a bit.
So I was like, oh, this is fantastic. But I had a bit of enforced rest, a little bit of a taper, and I just felt, when you get the taper just right, you feel like a coiled spring on race day.
Yeah.
But always at the back of my mind, it was like, this is just a qualifier, just take it easy.
Right.
But of course, when the race starts, it's difficult to keep that under control all the time. And I think my watch did tell me I hit a 3:21 kilometre at one point. That was probably a nice runnable gradual downhill.
Still though, 50 miles.
And of course, you always look at what the course records are in advance, and you kind of.
That's a hotly contested course record as well. Being a Tom Evans.
Tom Evans, he's a reasonable runner, isn't he? He's
pretty good.
He's done a few decent things.
Yeah. But coming at it from the ultra world in a sense, because that's what's so interesting about you is having come from a very more traditional roadie background.
But what's Tom Evans' background? I think he came from a road background.
He's definitely done some fast road running, but he certainly has made the biggest name for himself in the ultra scene. And actually, I think the South Downs Way 50, when he set that time, that was one of the first times he really made a bit of a noise. And then obviously since then, he's kind of gone international.
So I was up on his course record at halfway.
Right.
Which
is 5:45 or thereabouts, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
46, 44, something like that. And it was starting to get a bit hard. I can't remember what the weather was. Lovely, wasn't it?
It was like 12 degrees, very sunny.
It was a chilly start. I
actually got sunburnt on one. I've told this story before, but I got sunburnt on one side of my face because you're always heading with the south on your right.
Yes. So, funnily enough, I got locked in my campsite beforehand. So I nearly didn't actually make the start.
Well, presumably you were starting very, very early because they asked the faster runners to start early, didn't they?
Yes. So I did probably start closer to, I can't remember what the time window was.
Almost like 5 a.m. or something, wasn't it? It was really
between
early.
5 and 7 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did start fairly close to the start.
And did it feel like, because you mentioned you were trying to treat it as a qualifier, was it a race at any point, not with yourself, but with other people on the course? Or was it more like you can't tell because it's staggered start?
Well, you can't tell.
Yeah.
You can't tell. So I was just running, just running. I started with a guy, Peter Windross, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know who he was at the time, but we started chatting and they said, "Oh, you're going a bit quick. I'll see you later." Mm-hmm. I think did he come fourth or something that day? I can't remember.
He certainly won it in the past. He's
a very good runner. So yeah, I started chatting with him, and I just worked my way through the field, and someone said I was in the lead. I was like, "Oh, okay." So maybe started 20 minutes behind the first runners, but then at halfway, it was like, this is starting to feel a bit hard. I should probably be sensible. So I reined it in at halfway and walked all the uphills. Yeah. So I find living where I am, there isn't a superfluity of decent hills to train
this
on.
is true. Yeah.
There are some in Richmond Park. If I go a little bit further afield in the direction, there's Crystal Palace. There are some hills around, but they're not particularly long. They're not particularly steep. No. And they're not right on my doorstep.
Yeah.
When I lived in Dorking, I could get some decent vert on my way to Leatherhead. Not very far, the direct route, but I could go up and down Box Hill and various other ones, Norbury Park and places like that. But round here, so I did find that the hills were, I want to say a shock to the system, but they weren't my natural. Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings us to the Thames Path 100, which you were trying to qualify for. Again, you were in red shorts. Again, I saw you. This time I was volunteering actually at Aid Station 2 at mile 2022, which you breezed through without stopping. You ran an incredible time of 13:43:42, which I believe is still the fastest ever 100-mile time on UK soil for a trail race, I believe.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
That must have been an incredible day for you. I remember seeing you finish and you looked pretty broken.
I was quite done by the end. Yeah. It was certainly... Sorry, going back to the South Downs Way, that was because of COVID. It was delayed a week, so it's only 3 weeks between the 50 and the 100.
That is a proper taper, isn't it?
I think they call it a reverse taper, don't they?
Is that what it is?
where you go up the distance in. So yeah, I walked all the hills in the second half of the 50 and finished. Yeah, I was quite tired, but I think it was a good last run, and then I had a pretty good taper. So I was feeling good at the start of the Thames Path. One thing I completely neglected was nutrition.
Right.
I hadn't practiced fueling while I was running.
Right.
And this was somewhat my undoing in the race. I'd done some research about it. So I'd used Morton in the Capital Ring, and Morton's worked well for me. And people saying 80 grams of carbs an hour is a good goal.
Yeah.
And I got quite a detailed spreadsheet with what my planned nutrition was and what my energy expenditure was likely to be versus my intake. And
wow.
And obviously I'd be finishing a deficit. You can't, unless you're going quite slow.
Yeah.
You really can't replace the calories at the rate that you're burning them.
Yeah.
And when you run out of glycogen, obviously you have a significant change in pace because of how your body metabolizes fat versus sugar.
Yeah.
And the idea was to stave that off. But obviously I'd be running slow enough to try and digest as I go along.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. I had a chat with Robbie Britton actually.
Oh yeah.
About sort of strategy and what my goals were, and he was saying, well, it's not about your aerobic limit. It's not that physical part, not like lactate threshold. That's totally irrelevant. It's keeping running at a rate where you can keep digesting, keep your GI system on track.
Yeah.
Because with a marathon, you're running almost exclusively on glycogen.
Yeah.
And anything you take on is just trying to just top up a little bit to hold off the inevitable switch to fat burning. And the more you practice, the more you train, the more you can push that towards the latter stages.
Yeah.
So hitting the wall is running out glycogen and switching to fat burning. But when you're running fast, your blood is just going to your lungs and your legs. It's not going to your stomach. It's also not really going to your brain. You don't think well.
No.
You don't make good decisions when you're running hard.
Yeah. And food can seem extremely unappetizing, you know.
Well, exactly. So I've found often in a marathon, I've overhydrated, overfueled, and whenever I've stopped, I've always puked.
Right.
Because this has just been fluids and stuff sat in my stomach, not being absorbed. As soon as the adrenaline sort of goes off, it all comes out again. It's done me absolutely zero good.
Yeah.
I haven't absorbed any of it. It's just been sloshing up and down, making me feel uncomfortable. So the idea was to run slowly enough so I could keep my stomach online, so I could keep digesting, keep the energy going in.
And is that just by perceived exertion, or are you using a heart rate monitor, or how do you sort of gauge what that is for you?
Just I feel, really.
Yeah.
I was going on pace and feel.
I suppose it being a flat race, it's a lot easier to maintain kind of a consistent effort and pace.
Yes. And I must admit, I found that my heart rate strap.
Camera's too hot. Don't worry about that.
Camera's too hot.
It's a warm day.
Oh, okay.
I'll just let it cool down. We'll switch to the picture of Richard now.
need a fan on it.
Yeah.
Lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
Yeah, I found that my heart rate strap interfered with my ultra vest.
Right. Yeah.
So I got some. Interestingly, I discovered that during the South Downs Way 50.
Oh right.
Fairly early on.
Yeah.
And I actually slipped it down and wore it like round. I didn't take it off because I didn't really want to bother with trying to stash it somewhere. I just slid it down and wore it sort of around my navel.
Right.
And interestingly, it still worked fine. It still picked up, but it was a bit annoying. So I didn't bother with HR data at all. And to try and prolong battery life on my Garmin, I turned off wrist-based stuff. I find that's totally inaccurate.
It doesn't work, does it? No.
Especially when you've got skinny little wrists.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, just perceived rate of exertion. So I had a plan for 80 grams of carbs per hour, and also a fluid target as well. So I had a mixture of gels and malt and drink.
Mm.
And a friend had very kindly volunteered to crew me as well. And with COVID and the rules, you could have crew all the way from the start.
Oh, right.
So I first saw him like an hour and a half into the race or something. So there were never any points where I needed to rely on aid stations.
Yeah.
And I was merrily getting 80 grams of carbs in an hour, ticking along really nicely. I think my first marathon split was 2:55 or something like that, feeling like it was a breeze. And I was doing my mental calculations. I was going to get this done in 12 and a half hours. I was going to totally smash the UK record. And this was this was unbelievably easy. And then come halfway in about 6 hours, can't remember exactly, but around about 6 hours, it started to feel hard. And coming through Henley, my stomach emptied.
In which direction?
Oh, up.
Okay, good.
Up. No, yes.
In some ways, that's preferable, I suppose.
I suppose if it goes out the other end, you haven't necessarily absorbed all the nutrients, but there's some chance that it's actually gone through
Yeah.
you. Should we pause for a moment?
A very loud helicopter. We'll cut away. You're over the Heathrow flight path or something?
Also, we're quite close to St George's Hospital.
Oh, yeah.
So we do get medical helicopters
Yeah.
landing on their helipad. So they come, depending on what direction they quite often come over us. So I'd got my 80 grams of carbs in, plenty of fluids until halfway, and then a bit of an energy low, to say the least, after I'd emptied all that. And obviously your appetite completely goes, your whole system's screwed
Not
up.
pleasant,
And,
yeah.
so I'd gone from running at a decent pace to a bit of a walk. I was like, and a quite sort of mental low as well, thinking, all right, I've totally screwed this up. That's my race plan completely out of the window. Right, well, shall I stop? But I sort of managed to get back into a sort of hobble jog, and it wasn't the complete end to my race, fortunately.
Yeah.
But it was very much a positive split, significantly more than planned. And I was up on pace, my goal plan at halfway, so I was running faster than I intended.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, in hindsight, I could have run probably 15 minutes quicker with a different plan, different strategy, and not being quite so naive about how I was going to be doing things. But I can't really remember how much in the way of calories I got in the second half, but significantly less than 80 grams of carbs.
Well, you've since revisited the 100-mile distance, which explains the third of the 3 Centurion trophies that you'll have seen if you were watching the video before the GoPro killed itself. The South Downs Way 100 was, I think, 12 days ago. It's June 23rd today, which you also won. How's recovery been from that?
Well, interesting. Recovery's been pretty good. I think in the Thames Path, I went very deep.
Yeah.
And I think the lack of calories in the second half meant that I probably... Do you metabolize your own muscles? I think
you can, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there was...
rhabdomyolysis or something like that, when you start to basically pee out your own muscles.
Well, I lost 10% body mass in that race.
10%?
Yeah, I lost 6 kilos.
Jesus.
My first pee, once my urinary tract got online again, my kidneys had taken a bit of a hammering. My first pee was like treacle, and it was not particularly pleasant.
Yeah.
So that took, did I do damage to myself? It took a little while to bounce back.
Yeah.
Physically and mentally.
Yeah.
It was a bit of an ordeal. So yeah, certain things have gone well, certain things not quite so well. My real saviour in Thames Path was an old university friend, the cross-country captain from Imperial was there.
Oh, he was there.
He
not just in your head. You didn't have a flashback. Slow down,
I don't think I've
Richard.
ever had any hallucinations. I've heard of people. But yeah. He was there. He was randomly at 19 miles to go, totally unplanned.
Oh, wow.
And he said, he just planned to run a bit with me. And he ran with me all the way to the end. And
Brilliant.
it was a good distraction, actually. The weather wasn't great that day, and he was wearing worn-out road shoes, so he was slipping all over the place, keeping me entertained and just keeping me...
Yeah.
Just distracting me and telling me to stop walking so much. And So he was actually my crew chief for South Downs Way.
That's a very poetic way to end your first 100-mile race with your old cross-country captain.
Well, I reckon he probably knocked about 15 minutes off my time just with his encouragement.
Nice.
It was the value of a pacer cannot be understated.
Yeah.
And then I was looking for crew and pacers for South Downs Way. I asked if he'd be willing to help, and he was more than. I was delighted that he was happy to assist. So he was in some ways the brains of the operation.
Yeah.
So recovery's been considerably better because I learned a bit from Thames Path. I didn't try and get 80 grams of carbs in.
Yeah.
I just went by feel. And actually looking back, I probably got more like 30 grams of carbs per hour over the total distance. So considerably less, but that I was still getting them in all the way to the end. I didn't have any issues.
The consistency almost was more important than the sort of volume.
Yes. But unfortunately, the important thing was training. I really hadn't managed to get the same volume of training in. Over lockdown. It wasn't easier, but there were less pressures.
Yeah.
Previously, when I was commuting to Leatherhead, that was very easy. I would run halfway to work in the morning, run all the way home. That was 30k in a day, easy.
Yeah.
I could get some hills in I wanted. I could get some speed in. I could vary it. I could go longer if I wanted. If I go particularly long, I could take super long routes in or back, and or shower at work. It was just easy. I needed to get to work. Wanted to get a run in. It's the most efficient way of tackling them. Working from home, slightly different. Okay, if you've got to start work, you've got to get from your bed to your desk.
Yeah.
If you choose to go for a run in between, every run starts and finishes at your front door.
Yeah.
Rather, runs didn't have a secondary purpose.
Yeah.
So you need to be more self-motivated, and I was very motivated for Thames Path. The alarm was gradually tweaking forwards until it was going off at 4:15. And I'd get a couple of times a week get a 20-mile run in before breakfast and other things. But subsequent to that, I've been commuting to France. I've been in France most weeks.
That's a long run.
Well, it's a long drive. And northern France certainly aren't any hills to speak of.
Yeah.
So it's been more challenging getting the miles in.
Yeah.
It's been more a challenge staying awake on the M20 while driving to France or home from France as well.
Yeah.
So I really wasn't as well prepared going into the South Downs Way.
Well, you still absolutely smashed it. I mean, it's incredible time.
Well, it was quite clear early on that I wasn't going to be hitting my rather overly ambitious goal. But it was, okay, it's a question of, okay, just manage expectations. Let's just keep on moving, keep on getting the fluids and the carbs in. My crew chief was fantastic. He was always there, but I knew that the marginal gains were probably going to be key.
Yes. So
I don't know if you noticed Thames Path this year, the winner wasn't wearing a vest of any sort.
Who won it? Oh,
Tristan.
From Trail and Error podcast. Yes, he wasn't. He was wearing a waist pack.
Yep. Was it Ultra Aspire or something?
Yes.
I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'd actually made my own vest for the South Downs Way 15, which I wore for Thames Path.
Right.
Because I've got quite a nice vest, Innovate vest, which I wore for the... So I wore that for the Capital Ring. I wore a little decathlon one for the Jubilee Greenway, which just held two... It was a pair of 250ml flasks. So I just needed a bit of fluids for that. Obviously I needed a bit more food and fluids for the Capital Ring, but it was more vest than I wanted, and also got horribly chafed up in the process. I thought, well, let's look at what minimum kit I need. Don't need to carry very much, so it was a pretty slimline vest I made. So two flasks on the front, as you expect. It's a couple of underarm pockets for snacks and things, and just the pocket on the back was only just big enough to fit my minimum kit.
Right.
And actually at the end of the South Downs Way 50 last year, the organisers were quite intrigued to see if I was actually carrying everything, because you couldn't tell I was even wearing a vest underneath my jacket at the start.
Yeah.
So that served me well. It did me well on the Thames Path as well.
So did you like sew this thing?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I'm reasonably handy with a sewing machine.
Right.
Making kites and bits and pieces.
You
from
start your
edge.
own trail running company. McDowell vests.
If I was looking to the amount of time that goes into one of these, they'd either be my time would have to be worth quite a lot.
Yes.
Not very much, or I'd have to sell these for quite a lot.
That's awesome.
So I'm not sure. Not sure if that's it.
I'm conscious for time. It's almost 2:00. So I've just got a couple more questions I'd like to pile on with you. One of them is, you've established yourself quite quickly in the sort of trail running scene and run some amazing times. Often in trail running and ultra running, the competitive side of it is kind of less important for many people than the sort of adventure of it, the experience of it, the kind of physical and emotional challenge. How much of that factors into it for you, or do you approach it with a kind of road runner's mindset of it's a distance, it's a course, how fast can I run it? Because you mentioned all these spreadsheets and things. I'm just curious about how that adventure side of it factors into it, if at all.
Obviously, you've got to manage expectations, but most races I like to go. Obviously, the Surrey League cross country, I'm not going to be winning those. Mm-hmm. Top 10 is a very good result for me. London Marathon, I'm certainly not going to be winning that. But a lot of these trail races, I will go in, not with the expectation, but the intention to win.
Yeah.
And obviously, the longer you go, there aren't so many people willing to do that distance. It's not as competitive.
Yeah.
So sometimes it depends who turns out on the day, but I have gone in with fairly bullish expectations in terms of time. And yes, if someone exceptional turns up on the day, you might get absolutely trounced. I've been fairly fortunate that I haven't been pushed too hard in the 4 races, the 4 ultras that I have done. But Pete Windross did push me quite close last weekend. This was my smallest winning margin ever.
Yeah.
So,
but is it a pure athletic pursuit for you, or is there a touch of the adventure to it? I mean, running 100 miles is going to be a venture into the unknown at some point.
It's always nice if there's some nice scenery.
Yeah.
you can't deny that it's some bits of London Marathon, for example, aren't necessarily the most visually appealing.
Yeah. Particularly the bit around Rotherhithe.
Well, I wasn't going to say, but also the Thames Path. Yeah. Some of that bit, some of those people talk about going through Reading, but people often going through Reading in the night. I went through Reading sort of mid-afternoon. It seemed fine to me, but yeah, it is an adventure. Of course, it's a bit more in a logistical challenge as well. If you've got a crew, some pacers, you're trying to organise them. You've got to get to the start and work out how you're getting back and things. Yeah, and you're covering quite a lot of ground in the process. So it's more of a journey, certainly. Yeah, it's not just cycle or tube to the start and run around, come home again. It's a bit more to it than that. So yeah, there is more to a long trail race than just a road race.
Well, it's only been 12 days since South Downs Way, but I am curious what's next for you. Are you sticking with ultras for the time being? Are you going to jump back down to marathons?
Well, I've just completed my championship entry for London again. So one thing I've found after Thames Path was getting back into the mindset for training. So I didn't have any program for London last year. Mainly because my just head wasn't in it. And it was difficult to tell exactly when I was ready physically to start training as well. I think I bounced back more quickly from South of it. Okay, I've been out for a gentle 10 mile the other evening. Felt, obviously not on amazing form, but felt fine. Yeah. So I think I might have a slightly more focused block for London than I did last year. See what happens. I do think I'm probably pushing the edge of what I'm capable of. I don't see myself as an exceptional runner. I'm never going to be breaking 2:15 or anything like that. Could I break 2:20? Maybe, if I really focused. But yeah, it's nice to be at the pointy end. It's nice to be in I think I was 10th or 11th or something. I was the second vet 40 last year. So it's still nice to be doing some reasonable times. But yeah, I'm eyeing up the North Downs Way 100 for next year.
Because one of the things about ultra running, I believe that in marathon running, people peak in their mid 30s to their early 40s, but ultra running, people are competitive right into their 50s. So is that something you've thought about for the next decade of your life?
Those stats possibly are biased in terms of professionals, in terms of when they start their running.
Right.
I'm quite an old starter. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really start running properly till about 5 years ago.
No way. Wow.
So when I moved back to the UK,
yeah.
So my first London was 2016, and I think my average training was 15 miles a week.
Right.
For that 18-week block.
Yeah.
And I ran 2:42 or 15 miles a week, plus quite a bit of cycle commuting as well.
Yeah.
So I haven't really been training hard for many years.
Right.
I think someone said it takes 7 years to peak. So obviously there is the physical aspect of, the longer stuff does suit the older athletes. But I may still have a couple of years left in me for the shorter stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm still getting quicker.
Yeah.
So all my PBs are from last year.
Yeah.
When I was 42.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm fully over the hill yet.
No,
but
far from my intention to.
But Peter Windross, second at South Downs Way. Did he win it last year? He came second at North Downs Way. He's in his 50s.
Yeah,
and he's exceptional.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
There's no reason to say you should.
I'm very curious because we're seeing these faster and faster times. Alexander Sorokin a few weeks ago running like a 6 hour 100k or something, and it's like the ultra running world is starting to, for a long time I feel like marathon runners have looked at ultra runners as sort of shuffling along, which they have been for a long time, but to see these paces entering into these distances, it's a very exciting time.
Yes. Is it are people thinking that he's going to be taking some of Yannis Kouros'?
Well, he's taken
times?
A couple.
Right.
But he's not ventured beyond 24 hours yet. And that's where Yannis Kouros really dominated, was the 48 to 6 day distances.
It's a question whether he has an appetite for that.
Yeah, I think Yannis Kouros averaging sort of under 6 minute kilometers for 6 days, it's a different thing, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. A friend of mine has done the Sri Chinmoy 24-hour track race. Mm-hmm. And I must admit, after reading about Darren Finn's exploits at 24-hour, I'm slightly curious about that, which is strange because I don't really like track racing. In terms of road, trail, cross-country track, that's definitely my least favourite discipline. Although my next race is a 1,500 metre in a Vets League on Monday. So,
wow.
So to combine a 24-hour and track, that does in some way sound like mental torture.
It does a bit.
I might go a little bit crazy in the process, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I could see you doing well at it. If you've got the roadrunner speed, the kind of systematic mindset, which is probably quite useful when you're racing a course that's very repetitive, and then the ultra experience, could be some magic.
Or it could just be a horrible, painful process.
Yeah, it could. Well, thank you so much for chatting to me and overrunning slightly. I just have one more question, which is something I'm asking everyone. What's your favourite place to run?
Ooh, favourite place to run? It's interesting because whenever I travel, because I travel quite a bit for work, I always plan some routes in advance. I use the Strava heat map to see where people are running. And I plot out, I think, okay, let's give myself a few options, some flat ones, some hilly ones, whatever. Program into my Garmin so I can just follow the route on my watch. There's no chance of getting lost. So yeah, I've run in some lovely places. The hills around Linz in Austria are nice. I've run them in winter and summer because I've been out there visiting suppliers several times. Richmond Park's lovely. But often it's not just the place, it's who you're running with as well. So a Sunday long run with my running club, social run, invariably it will involve most of a lap of Richmond Park or some other bits and pieces. So that's certainly, and it's a lovely surface. It's got some hills. It's a lovely place. Outright favourite, I'd struggle to say exactly where.
Well, Richmond Park's a good bet.
Yes, it probably wouldn't be the Thames Path in the rain. bit of mental imagery there. But yeah, I do run along the Thames Path a lot in different directions. So yeah, I'm outright favourite, not entirely sure.
Fair enough.
But there are a few contenders.
Yeah. Well, Richard McDowell, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And cut.
I started talking about kit and marginal gains.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got another 10 minutes. I could continue.
I could finish all the time in the world.
I could finish answering that question because I'd only just started.
Yes, no, do.
So I'm not sure if you can splice this back in.
I can absolutely. Bonus clips, whatever you need.
So Tristan was using a waist pack in the Thames Path. And this caused quite a lot of stir online. People say, how is he carrying all the mandatory kit? And actually, James Elson actually videoed his kit check at the end, just to shut up the naysayers. And this started the cogs whirring. If you think if it's a warm race, you cool down by perspiring. Well, not by perspiring, you cool down by the sweat evaporating. You need skin, exposed skin, for that evaporation to occur. If you've covered up half your back and half your front, that sweat can't evaporate. By using a waist pack and not wearing a vest, you can dramatically increase your cooling.
So is that noticeable? Have you noticed that effect?
So I sewed a big pocket into the back of a pair of shorts.
I saw, yeah.
So I carried all of my mandatory kit in a pocket onto my shorts.
Yeah.
It wasn't a waist pack. I've worn waist packs in the past, and I found that to stop them bouncing and being annoying, you need to have them quite tight on the waist, and that sort of makes you feel uncomfortable and feel sick and things. Even like in an Ironman, if you've got a number belt, that can be feel annoyingly tight on your stomach towards the later stages. So I thought, well, I modified a pair of shorts. I increased the width of the waistband, made them a bit taller at the back, and they weren't perfect. They were a little bit bouncy, but you're distributing the load across the surface of the shorts as opposed to just on one spot.
Yeah.
And I basically wore not quite a string vest, but an almost like a mesh vest, designed to be worn as an under vest.
Yeah.
So I could sweat through that. I could pour water over myself, and that was all. I think that made quite a big difference on Sunday. It would have made a big difference had it been warmer, I think, because it was up to 22, maybe 23. It wasn't, and it was quite a lot of sunshine at times, but it wasn't. It wasn't baking hot.
No, we've had some really hot weather recently, but the race sort of managed to sit in a pocket of relatively manageable.
I also made a custom race vest, basically just to hold bottles on the front, and then almost like a sort of razorback bra on the back. It was basically nothing to it. It was just like a cross.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a success. In theory, it was great because I was just holding some fluids.
You were sort of holding it at times in pictures and things.
Yeah, it was too bouncy.
Right.
Because you need the weight on the back to stabilize it. So that wasn't a success. So at the first cruise stop, I gave that to Mike. And actually, for all the stops in between, I didn't need to carry more than one flask.
Right.
Apart from the second cruise stop, I managed to miss him. So I did run dry to the third.
Right.
And that was, I think that had an impact actually. I had a bit of a low point. I've been running dry for a little while. But for the rest of that, I was just one flask in my hand. So he had ice, he had water. So every stop it was just some ice down my shorts. That's interesting because you got some big arteries there. All your blood is going to your legs. So if you can get some ice, where the arteries are close to the skin, that's going to cool down. So I was jangling along with ice down my crotch, and I think that made quite a big difference.
Because I've got similar to the thing Tristan used. It's the naked running band. And it's just like an elasticated band, and you have to get the right size because it doesn't adjust at all. It's just one piece of cloth, and it's brilliant. And you can get everything you need in it because it's got these sort of elasticated hoops, so you can thread a raincoat or something through that. But yeah, I've found that it does bounce a bit, and also I found like I did a 50k on Saturday, and I was debating using it, and I ended up using a traditional vest because I just needed to carry a litre of water. Because even though it was only 50k in the heat and the humidity, I knew that I needed to keep drinking. So I'm just curious, like managing, like I guess you're hitting aid stations much faster, right, in terms of the amount of water you've got to intake. But for me, the biggest factor when I've done ultras has been, can you keep drinking water? Can you keep? And if you run out of water, which I have, it's very scary.
Well, I was being resupplied at least every hour.
Yeah.
Apart from that one time, I missed Mike.
Yeah.
So. And actually, my first pacer, he grabbed me 2 Calipos. They were nice.
Life saving. Yeah.
It's funny. I was walking. Maybe I was jogging at the time. So what happens if I drop this? I'm going to be very upset. Couldn't you go back and get me another one? He said, I've got another one in my pocket. Absolutely magic. So yeah, 2 Calipos.
And so, if you had to guess, how much of a difference do you think those marginal gains added up to?
So the fact that I wasn't stopping at aid stations, the fact that I had ice, the fact that I could cool down, I reckon that, and paces.
Yeah.
Paces are probably quite personal. I'm sure some people would gain more of a benefit from paces than others.
Yeah.
Peter's obviously very experienced. I don't think he's ever had a pacer. Although actually I was quite keen to pace him for the last leg of the Autumn 100 last year. Unfortunately at the time it didn't work out. And he came second by 10 seconds, I think.
Oh, was that a staggered start?
Yes.
So he wasn't sure.
At Reading, there was 2 seconds between him and first.
Oh,
and then it extended to 10. I'm sure that would have made it. Who knows? Maybe I would have slowed him down. But
no, you could definitely have pushed him.
But yeah, I'm sure that made a difference. I'm sure if he had the same planning as I had, I think the difference would have been very, very a lot smaller. So the plan is for the next time to actually do a bit more training, so I'm not quite so reliant on the marginal gains.
They do add up though. If you, aid stations being a big one, if you spend a minute at every aid station and there's 20 of them, it adds up.
Yep. And I think, obviously my moving time and my total time was different.
Yeah, of course.
But every time I was stopped, I was being iced or being cooled down or something. It wasn't just standing waiting or anything like that.
Yeah, and no sitting down.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I didn't stop. I didn't stop to sit down at any point. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. We could sell that advice. That's top quality stuff.
How do we monetize this?
Give me a few years. One thing I did want to quickly ask you about was how you do all this with a young family. You got two kids?
Yeah, 3 and 6.
3 and 6.
Early starts.
Nice names.
Early starts.
Yeah, because I've seen you done some runs at 4:30 and things like that.
Well, the alarm regularly, not right at the moment because I'm not back in training, but the alarm is regularly going off at 4:30.
Yeah.
So my training window is between 4:30 and 7. So I always try and get back by 7 for kids' breakfasts and getting ready for school and things.
Amazing.
So yeah, but then the corresponding thing is tired.
Yeah.
Going to bed early.
Yeah.
So it's interesting at the moment. I basically don't see my wife apart from the weekends because either I'm in France or when I'm home, I'm in bed before she's back from work. So yeah, early mornings. Because you might not necessarily think about, I want to go for a run. But if you lose that window doesn't present itself later on.
No.
I think for the Thames Path, I was sneaking out at lunchtimes as well. Sometimes just a quick sort of gentle shake the legs out, 10K at lunchtime, some lunchtimes. But early mornings.
Something I'm trying to learn. It's easier, I suppose, when you've got that race on the horizon that you know you're training for.
Goal target, yes.
Otherwise, it's very easy to hit that snooze button.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard.